spoken and heard events, sponsored by the City of Athens, Ohio, and Arts West. Many, many thanks to our sponsors. For those of you who do not know me, I'm Carrie Gunter Seymour. I'm the Poet Laureate of Ohio, and I'm so pleased and excited to be here with all of you tonight. Ryan and Scott are here with us from the City of Athens as technical support this evening, and we really appreciate all their efforts to keep us going, keep us live. Tonight's event is being recorded and streamed live right this minute from Facebook and will be archived on the City of Athens YouTube and the City of Athens government channel 1024 for sharing and for future review. I just have one little joyous announcement to make. I just want to share real quickly with you tonight the amazing lineup of readers for the winter-spring 2021 season. In January, on the 21st, Sun Magazine fame, poet Allison Luterman will be visiting us from California, along with poet Chiquita Mullins Lee. She's the State of Ohio's Poetry Out Loud coordinator, and Athens, Ohio's very own Megan B. will bring us her outstanding musical poetry. On February 18th, the amazing Allison Joseph. She's a poet, award-winning books, editor of Crab Orchard Review, and we'll also have Hillbilly Hustle author Wesley Brown. On March 18th, best-selling author of Prettiest Star, Carter Sickles, and Jessica Salfia, co-author of 55 Strong, Inside the West Virginia Teachers' Strike. And on April 15th, Anek Sanuk Clapsaddle. She's the author of the new best-selling Even As We Breathe, and Robert Gipe, the personality extraordinaire and author of Trampoline, Weed Eater, and his newest, due out in February, Pop. So it's going to be an amazing season in the winter, spring. So I'm looking forward to having you all back at that time. But tonight, we have three outstanding readers with us. From Youngstown, Ohio, poet Karen Schubert, poet and nonfiction writer from Columbus, Ohio, Elle Renee, and West Virginia author Carter Taylor Seaton. We'll have a very short Q&A after the readings, and if we have time, I invite a few of you to consider joining in the pop-up open mic. And what that means is after hearing our readers read, if you have a poem or a short bit or even a song that carries on the same theme or stream of consciousness, I invite you to type your name into the chat. And the first few who type in will be invited into our webinar to read. So let us begin. Karen Schubert is the author of The Compost Reader from Accents Publishing 2020 and 5 chapbooks, including Dear Youngstown from Night Ballet Press and I Left My Wings on a Chair, winner of the Wick Poetry Center Chapbook Prize. Her poetry and creative nonfiction appear in 21st Century Plague, Poems and Prose for a Pandemic, the Ohio Poetry Association Common Threads, Raw Data, Living in the Fallout from the Coronavirus, Under the Blossoms That Hang on the Bough, Pollination Poems, through the Edith Chase Symposium, and in the Raleigh Review. Her awards include an Ohio Arts Council Individual Excellence Award and residencies at the Vermont Studio Center and Headlands Center for the Arts. She is the founding director of Litz Youngstown in Northeast Ohio, and she coordinates one of the finest conferences in Ohio. And I urge you all to look for that in the fall. It's always just an excellent and wonderful time. I've had the honor of calling Karen my friend for several years. She's in the business of providing opportunity for poets and writers of diverse ages from all over the state and beyond. She has boundless energy, a quick wit, and is an amazing poet. Please welcome Karen Schubert.
Oh my gosh, Carrie, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you to the City of Athens, and I'm really looking forward to reading with Elle Renee and Carter tonight. I'm so looking forward to hearing your work. I'm going to be reading from my new, my first full-length book called The Compost Reader. It might be backwards, published by Accents Publishing. I'm going to start with a poem that is an ekphrastic poem that's riffing off of two artists, Robert Wick, who creates large bronze sculptures of these beautiful women who are holding plants and are so organic, and also James Turrell, who is working at light and perception. And Robert Wick told me that he was very influenced by James Turrell, and I thought that was really interesting and wonderful. Bronze and Light for Robert Wick and James Turrell. For 10,000 years, the sculptor's tall figures will stride or recline. It is their Bronze Age. The crooks of their arms and bellies cradle plants alive with humming birds and dragonflies. Reflecting pools shimmer across mottled green patina. The sculptor tells me he's been influenced by the artist who works in light, whose pieces turn to empty rooms at the switch's night click. Waves of reds and purples dissipating into atmosphere or breath. The bronze sculptor's house is lit with holes where the sky comes down. Thick colored stucco hold up walls of windows. A womb of glass encircles the kitchen, overlooks the canyon lying round like the mountain's lap. Archaeologists will find the bronze woman deep in her red desert clay, touch her open abdomen fecund with compost, desiccated cactus leaves that captured light, bouncing its way out of the art and into the dry canyon wind. Enough about your flat tire in the middle of Pennsylvania and who left jagged metal there. I'm saving up news, going out to pull rows of Sharon saplings in rain. You'd put a stop to that. Everyone is crazy here with politics. I am too, but I'm sick of the name calling. Come back on your new tire, your windshield rinsed clean in the Delaware water gap. Tell me how it was there in Not Home. Come back wearing your magenta shirt, your penumbra. I miss our Cambrian dreams. Stars below us. When I cross his path like an open ladder, like confused black cats crisscrossing, he speaks the incantation, summons the car keys. I demand punishment for the keys, missing again. Now we are late. But he says no. Being lost is not a crime. When my spine dissolves and I disappear, gliding low above the floor, in and out of sealed boxes of addresses I have outlived and dresses I have outgrown. He reaches into a drawer, pulls out invisible woman glasses he sent away for, 3 UPC codes and a subway token, lures me out of the photograph with promises of chocolate and fine kisses. When my unscheduled tide rises, he wades in, leaves his shoes on the shore, steps deep and deep until he is floating above me, immersed, long man legs straight over me, gentle breast stroke, breathing for us both, until the tide recedes and we lie and peer into pools, starfish below, reflection of real stars in our eyes. This is also after an installation by James Turrell that's in the Mattress Factory in Pittsburgh. And in this installation, you step into an empty room that has this rectangular panel of light hanging on the far wall. But as you get closer, you realize that you are tricked by your perception. Danae, after stepping into a sculpture by James Turrell. The room glows purple with its suspended rectangle of light, silent except the sound of warmth, maybe, but not our shoes that step into the open over the reflecting wooden floor, leading us toward the light with nothing on our minds except the way our insides are suddenly soft, mouths closed to hold in the hum. We approach the illumined box that might be held by invisible strings or beams of something lavender, the pollen of a million violets, maybe, or the essence of dusk. But instead of a solid thing, the light is a window into another room where black light turns shirts electric white. We put our hands in again and again, skeleton teeth laughing. So one day I was perusing Etsy and I saw the Wire Man, and I started wondering what his life might be like. He calls her Etsy. The Wire Man springs off the metal pot filled with Spanish moss. Not that he needs to sit with those trellis legs upright, the effort it takes to bend something like a knee. But he's been with the boiled wool woman, admiring her seams and the way her waist makes a crook. She can't stand on her own, but she leans with grace on the glass emerald bonsai lit with sunlight that goes right through the Wire Man. She absorbs the light, has a fullness the Wire Man can't stop thinking about. If she says yes, he thinks, they will make love under the emerald tree, his sharp edges curved in, her rippable skin warm under the heart pocket dress. Later, he will make her a mouth. This poem begins with two epigraphs. Autobiography. Don't be married to autobiography. Bill Brady. I may be dating myself here. Anja Farron. I am not married to autobiography, but we are lovers. This is my first lesbian relationship. I've been trying to awaken my inner lesbian for years. But until now, all I could muster was an artistic lust for the female figure. Autobiography is different. Although she embarrasses me, won't let me tell the story the way I want to. She reminds me about the wine stain on the satin chair, forgotten Mother's Day cards, my fear of glass elevators. She makes fun of me, the gray tooth, and the way one eye squeezes shut when I laugh. She says beauty is symmetrical. I'm obsessed with autobiography, call her late at night and leave message after message. I just want to hear her voice. I think she is two-timing me. I'm afraid she will run off with the other woman. We fight, we make up. We go to our cafe, bookstore, and later I will write about it. When autobiography and I walk by people we know, they tremble. In the city where I come from, after Nin Andrews. In the city where I come from, the cost of a thing depends on how much you have. One year I was so broke, I bought a bus for $5. I got it from the bus company at the dead bus garage. I was still pretty strapped, so it only cost 78 cents to get it fixed. I gave hard luck people a ride. Sometimes we went to the grocery store and we could get a lot of food if we pooled our change. Salmon, lemons, oatmeal, dish soap, it all fit on the bus. Winter days, we rented skates to figure eight around Lake Glacier, or we went to the movies and filled up the first and second row. In one movie, we saw Niagara Falls, and someone said we should go there. I knew once we left our city, things would be different. Everyone paid the same, no matter how much you had. So we gassed up the bus and packed roasted chicken, pies, coffee, and thermoses, a real feast. We drove up and got out our new cameras. The other tourists had accents, so we made up a fake country and started every word with a Z or O. We ate our picnic and crossed back over the Rainbow Bridge, but a tornado was coming toward us, so we pulled up to a museum and ran inside. The tornado missed us, but it hit the parking lot across town where Willie Nelson's tour bus was parked. Willie was in the museum too, and he asked where we were from. He'd heard of it and thought we had some great ideas. He needed a bus, and in the spirit of our town, he gave me $1 million. I split the money up, and we bought some cars and headed home. We had to pay more for things after that. Chicken cost $99, and it was still $320.50 to go to the movies. But we went the same as before, and we still liked riding together. That fall, we took another trip, chartered a bus all the way to Graceland. The cautions. The campus rec center is mostly empty. Staff chatty before the quiet winter break ends. My first time in the gym, I change into sweats in a tight stall, eavesdrop on two women who come in from swim class talking about chlorination. One skin was so bad last vacation, she finally realized it was the water. I grab my coat, boots, bag, step out to ask about lockers. The woman sitting on the bench is naked from the waist up, so I quickly check my hair in the mirror. She says pink locks are for staff, but she never bothers. She looks into my reflected eyes, above her round, wrinkled shoulders, freckled chest with a single breast dipping down. She pulls on a pant leg. Anyway, she says, I leave my purse in the office, so there's not anything valuable to take. The other woman nods, says it's a safe campus. I've never lost anything, she says. This poem also begins with an epigraph. Second spring. She throws up her hands, catches them. Amy Bracken Sparks. When she spreads open her eyes for him after they have taken off their disquietudes, kicked them from the bed, red sun beyond the window, blind striping her back with light. The way he comes closer, outside somewhere lie the pieces of mirror and the hard hairbrush, bargains with God. Inside, she finds the handful of consummate skin, his inset spine, assonance. She inhales his breath, since she saw the back of him on the bus last Tuesday, or at least those shoulders, that hair, earring, the way he lowers himself to sit. Time was, she preferred to be alone. The angry men she used to know tumble down the stairs. Warm front. Trees bend and touch in this change, all contact and noise, shaking nests, pods, petals, apples hard and small like marbles in the mouth. The low moan of thunder through the trough, lightning like headlights in the window of a darkened bedroom, wet smell of loam. Look at that spruce that fell, roots rupturing ground mush, cleaving into the limbs of another, standing so close. A tree falls, and all I hear is you asking, when will you come back? And this is my last poem. Thank you all so very much. This poem came from an evening where there were a whole bunch of people who had never met before, and there was a young woman who seemed particularly nervous, and she was being very chatty, I just think because she was so nervous. And at one point she said, "I don't trust miso soup." And even though she explained that later, my brain was just like a hound after a rabbit. I had to chase that one down. Dangers of miso soup. "I don't trust miso soup," she says, and ominous music begins to play in the background as she pushes her soup away with long rust-colored nails. Not rusty nails, those dangers we know about, unlike miso soup that sloshes innocently in its painted bowl, although I admit is suspiciously murky, hiding strips of seaweed. And even later, when she tells me what she meant was, I am vegetarian, and sometimes Japanese restaurants stir fish paste into miso soup, I can't stop the movie from playing. Courageous heroine leaps from her car, escape facilitated by her unclasped seatbelt, heals out a cigarette, and then, no time to scream, miso soup in close pursuit. She runs down the street in stilettos, flowy sleeves of her rayon top billowing like smoke from a gun, miso soup closing in, white paddle spoon clattering.
Oh, Karen, I'm so glad you shared your wit with us tonight, because that is one of your finest attributes. And I'm so excited about thanking you so much. And what a lovely book. We all need to own that. And I've again put that information in the chat, and I'll just keep doing that throughout the night. And there are lots of wonderful comments about your work, Karen. So I hope you will look in the chat window to see those. So we are so lucky tonight. We have yet another poet. Elle Renee is a poet and nonfiction writer from Columbus, Ohio. She is a third-year MFA candidate at Indiana University, where she has served as the nonfiction editor of Indiana Review and as associate director of the Indiana University Writers Conference. She is the recipient of the 2020 Indiana University Guy Lemon Award in Public Writing, the 2019 Indiana University Writers in South Asia Award, the 2018 Alumni Award Fellowship from the Martha's Vineyard Institute of Creative Writing, and National Silver Medal in Poetry at the NAACP's Afro Academic Cultural Technology and Scientific Olympics. Her work has received support from the Fine Artwork Center in Provincetown, Minnesota, Northwoods Writers Conference, Kenyon Review Writers Workshop, and Green Mountain Writers Conference. Her poems have been published or are forthcoming in Tin House, Online, Poet Lore, the Minnesota Review, Appalachian Review, Southern Humanities Review, New Limestone Review, and the Women of Appalachia Project's Women Speak. She holds a Master of Science degree in journalism from Columbia University's Graduate School of Journalism, where she received a Joseph Pulitzer II and Edith Pulitzer Moore Fellowship, and a Bachelor of Arts degree in English with honors from Roanoke College. Most importantly, Ella Renee believes in Black joy and preserving the stories of her ancestors. You may occasionally find her at Ella Renee Poems on Instagram. So Ella Renee and I recently met. She submitted her work to the Women of Appalachia Project, of which I am the founder and executive director. And I just want to say that reading her work is a joy, but to hear her read it is just exquisite. And I'm proud and pleased to welcome Elle Renee to Athens County this evening. Elle Renee.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here with all of you. That was the long bio, so thank you for hanging with us here. I'll read a mixture of things tonight. I think just to ground us, I write poems engaging with Black identity, lineage, the body, Appalachian landscape, and nourishment. My work is informed by my own genealogical research, unearthing details of my ancestors' lives from the mountains of North Carolina and tobacco fields of Virginia to the coal mines of West Virginia. I infuse oral history that I've collected and recorded from living elders about their experiences and their recollections of ancestors. I wrestle with what I've inherited from their persistence and survival. I also probe how the characters in my poems are nourished through prayer, relationships, and the fruits of their labor on land and on water. This too goes back to the body, how it is a home for our sacrificial acts, for our needs, pleasures, and griefs. My book in progress is a collection of historical records, photographs, ephemera, poems, and prose. I'm going to start by reading something new, a prosy piece. Transcendence, notes from the archivist logbook. Date 10/22/2020. Route unmapped. Type of piloting time unknown. Total duration of flight unknown. Remarks and endorsements. Please see below. Today, I decided to wallpaper my hallway. I took down the 2 pine poster frames from each of the old lone nails they dangled from. One frame held a print of 4 fish, each with figure notes, but no labels for their origin. I was drawn to these images, these beautiful bright colors, emeralds and orange pinks and cerulean blues, the pattern scales, penny tile hexagons, curved triangle fans that lacked classification. I wanted to find out for myself who these fish were, not to be told their names. I went to Google, clacking my fingers, and tried to identify them. Figure 1, smallmouth bass. Figure 2, brook trout. Figure 3, possibly Atlantic bluefish, but the artistic rendering of the fins looked a bit off to me. I didn't need a translator for figure 4, fish skeleton. Every spiny bone, vertebrae, and fin ray was perfectly intact, whole. I marveled at this, how every living thing is a puzzle whose pieces have to fit precisely for frames to be complete, for intentions to be made manifest. So I thought. When I looked down the second frame, I almost felt the dandelion fuzz graze like a ghost across my face. I laughed at the canopy of chimney sweep brushes jumping off the midnight blue poster paper. Flowers have always spoken strange language to me. I have trained my ears to listen to them. This poster showed every stage of their development, long green red stems sprouting from the ground, topped by dozens of yellow orange fringe, those golden skirts shrinking, then replaced by viridescent ribbed bulbs that sprouted too, blooming whisper white heads of hair arranged in clumps, readying their seeds to launch come the promise of a good breeze. These came with a brief origin story under a banner emblazoned record of analysis. Order, composite family, genus, Taraxacum, species T. officinale, common name, dandelion, from the French dandelion, meaning lion's tooth. Other names, blowball, puffball, dune head, clock, cankerwort, witch's gowan, wet abed, swine snout, monk's head, priest's crown. Location, anywhere. Date, May 1903. Who has the power to name a flower, to name anything? Call out a bass's small mouth, make one of possibly hundreds of attributes the main way our eyes see them, so that one feature becomes their name. All else is rendered invisible, unrecognizable. Google can't tell me the complete story. It is embedded in the archive where uncertain histories are stored, families of flowers that existed before people created language and discovered them and gave them names and congratulated themselves for their fine findings, their omnipotent order. I took down these old ways of looking, the ways that nature, make objects of living things by placing them in neat categories. I knew better now. Our making is messy. Sometimes the pieces don't fit tailored to our bodies like bones. Sometimes we have to grow into them. Our blank spaces fastened together with sweat from a body unknown to us, prayer from a tongue whose language we don't yet speak. Sometimes we have to set down old pieces that don't serve us anymore and unlearn their armor. But above all this, we must collect what is left behind, reclaim the rock-riddled footpaths and lay our wreaths of gratitude, our long-stemmed care, pour rivers of libations for the innumerable blood-stained feet that set us upon solid ground, who thought enough of the dream of us to persist, to transcend a long-suffering reality, to make us real eventually in time, by and by. A wall, after all, can become a portal. The next poem I'm going to read, I want to give a shout out back to Carrie for editing Women Speak Volume number 6. I'm so grateful to be a part of that. It's available online for purchase. So I know some people are doing last minute Christmas gift shopping, so feel free to have a look. This poem is Genealogical Trip to Pulaski, Virginia. The mayfly swarm undulates like the perfect hip role model bodies plow brown bodies mid-air. Wings fade as fine gossamer in June sun, buoyed by a buzz too quick to be caught by my eye, which doesn't want to bear the witnessing. How nature persists in getting on with it publicly. Life, sex, death in the span of a day. I turn away, overcome by shame. I look through my Ford's cracked glass at the white mile markers blurring a black highway. Why does our making always begin in denial? When I find my great-great-grandmother, Frances Hounshell, and census records, branded mulatto and a mother at age 9, I do not wince. I practice numbness, focus only on getting back to the alpha mama who owned her own body, her own name somewhere off the coast of Ghana or Nigeria, maybe where her breath, not her sweat, was enough currency. In Virginia, it's common to see the dead mayflies skip across pavement like flat rocks tossed side-armed at a stream's surface, then lodged in sidewalk cracks among orphan pebbles, sticks, and sprigs of grass. I'd rather look at uncountable rows of tobacco leaves, which leave me breathless, dizzy even. All those green ears flap like an elephant's hello, hang woody scent heavy through my car vents like next of kin hugs, hugged only at family reunions. In death, Female mayfly lips freeze into an O, as if reading a whistle, as if leaving evidence of no after the males give chase, grab their tiny legs, drag them to the ground after the mount. It happens like this. Whole lives, purpose for labor and procreation. Night collects her bounty. By daybreak, bodies pile by the hundreds on windowsills and porch corners. In the middle of a passage, pedestrians stroll between a jail and courthouse. The nice white genealogist at the local library tells me Francis's age must be wrong, an error in reporting. But I know a nymph can be snatched from her skin, molt and molt until she becomes something new, gains wings, if only for a brief view of the dust she will soon call home. This next poem is forthcoming in the Minnesota Review. Just want to give a content warning for sexual violence. Sweets. The boy was my friend. We were supposed to go to the movies, but what he wanted to see started after my curfew. I had a curfew to keep me safe. I should have went home early. Instead, we went to his home. His mom would be home. We could watch a movie there. I thought I'd be safe. His TV VCR was in the basement. It wasn't finished. The boy, the basement. I could see the anatomy of drywall, not yet walls that would soon see my anatomy, the pink of it. The insulation was fluffy, like cotton candy. I loved cotton candy. I'd stuff mounds of it in my mouth, in my 11-year-old mouth, unable to stop until I puked. I loved how it melted, the alchemy, the feel of a solid thing becoming not a solid thing. At 16, I learned what it was to become not solid, how quickly pin limbs betray you, liquefy when violence is stuffed inside the pink of you, the way it expands and melts but doesn't go away. The crystalline residue, the boy has never gone away. He was my first friend. He wasn't stuffed my screams with a cotton candy pink pillow. I now know nothing good comes from a thing unfinished. A movie, a boy, a basement, a hunger so sickening you might mistake it for a sweet tooth. Switching gears a little bit, I have this obsession with genealogy and the generational patterns that I uncover, like you might see with those two poems dovetailing. I've thought a lot about my hunger for information as a kind of consumption. So what you should know about this poem is that is a feature of it. And it also takes inlines from Vivi Francis's poem, A Flight of Swiftlets Made Their Way In. This is Some Nights We Have the Moon. There are no swans here, just corn and potatoes pushing past small town dirt. I want to be done with want, so I tell my feet to stalk the wheat, swaying at the edge of a field, past the silos and scythes, past the scabbed scaffolding of the barn's ash skeleton, where old man Blue hung himself after rows of turnips refused to green. Sometimes a person can have their fill of loneliness. Desire is a tick that hides on my haunches until the bite pulses its red district light, needling my already stilly goose, pimpled flesh, need swelling like interminable hurricane water. When I float inside night shade, I tried not to think of the wreath of flies that lined his neck, how breath left with a tawdry grunt, but the stench of death stayed salty in my mouth, and I liked it. Can blood cover shame? The old man wouldn't want his good church friends to find him swaying like that from the rafters, so I cut the rope, watched the body land like some beached star, 5-pointed with arms and legs spread. The head bled a halo in perfect circle. I let the wolf of me spread out and howl full-throated at the pearl and ink cloud, the incessant incandescence, my back licked by air's black thicket. I shouldn't say what happened next. How 1,000 centipedes squirmed beneath my skin, how tufts of fur emerged from my pores, how I bristled like a corn husk crushed under a boot. I shouldn't say my teeth knew exactly what to do with their new pointy tips, how top incisors tore into his flesh as any country girl would a waxy plum, careful not to open the jaw too wide and waste the tart juice jolt a tongue longs for. It is easy to suck clean the marrow. From any man's flimsy bones, gristle ultimately gives, mixes saliva into a powdery broth, some sucor to sweeten sorrow's bitter crop. I can't tell you why the moon reminds me of empty seats, the rooms wiped clean of all who have left us. I can't tell you why I can't let my dead rest, why I've always savored their carcasses. I have never been whole, so there was room. Next poem I want to dedicate to my mama, with whom I would not literally be here, but whose support of my dreams have kept me steadfast and true to my call. This poem is about the Black girl old school tradition of hair pressing, and it is entitled Pressing. By Saturday afternoon, the stovetop needed rest, but Mama said there's no rest for the weary. By then, her hands had already pressed spatulas into skillets of sizzling bacon, cheesy scrambled eggs, and Granny Smiths, softening their sour peels in a pool of butter, brown sugar, a cloud of cinnamon and nutmeg crackling. This was our tradition. Full bellies after cleaning the apartment until it reeked of Clorox bleach, until windows were Windexed, almost transparent as air, but ours tinged fake pine tart as if cardboard trees hung bright green from the newly glossed wood furniture. And still her hands pressed on, untangling my 2-week-old braids, soiled with playground sweat, dandelion dust, fuzzy wayward wisps left by an Ohio wind's kiss as I flung my blue beretted head back to predict the precise velocity my hand needed to pummel a tetherball so fast the sucker kid wouldn't have time enough to interfere with its perfect spiral, like the curled hair I longed for. Mama scratched my scalp clean with French tip nails and the kitchen sink bubbles foaming away stories of my days she always asked about. I sat in the back of our 1987 Ford Mercury after latchkey and her long paralegal shifts. The Navy box on wheels barely putted us home, exhaust letting out black plumes of smoke and gasps like gunshots. Mama pressed her foot down on the pedal to carry us to the weekend when she cranked up the boombox loud enough to hear Mary J. Blige crooning about real love over the hairdryer, and shellacked my fro with scoops of Royal Crown Petroleum, dressing down the full shaft of my fluff, wielding the same oak-barreled pressing comb my grandmama heated on top an old coal stove in the kitchen of her mining camp shack telling my mama, as my mama tells me now, to hold down my ear when she hovers near my temples, so scorching brass teeth don't take a bite of my barely worn skin. So this last poem I want to read is in the anthology as well, first published by Appalachian Review. And the only thing you should know is there's a reference to Luther Vandross's song, Bad Boy Having a Party, which you all should listen to after this reading, and the card game Bid Whist, which is akin to spades, but is a staple in my family. This poem is Fish Fry. Everything delicious is served on Friday. Jesus should get a do-over for the Last Supper, since he missed out on the miracle that is Wonder Bread made paste by purchased cornmeal, skin, sweat, and Crisco, clinging like faith to a mouse roof. Even as the tongue tries to negotiate release, swat freedom for teeth. We know what delay tastes like. We have waited for a check that affords us this feast of fish, golden crisp, and the glow of Black joy. With Luther Vandross praising us for being bad on Aunt Mary's 45 spinner, who would call this dinner? Stove tops bubble with pots of kale and collards, made sides only by smoked ham hock oozing salty fat, their doneness determined by Mama Joyce, who dips her too blessed to be stressed mug in the pot liquor and sips slowly, purses her lush lips and declares it got more melons every time the Russell comes by to kiss her highest cheekbone, his jeans drifting toward hell like he forgot his real tribe. Never mind, no matter, we made it here together. The old timers will say, though they suck their teeth at the sight of his draws, at the sight of a renegger at their bid whist table, at the scent of DD's too sweet macaroni and cheese. We all fall short of perfection like memory, but Uncle Harold brings us back to where we started. Yellow perch biting their ashen end of a line in Lake Erie's Ohio waters, the place granddaddy, wearing his old mining boots, taught generations the patience needed to stay fed. Uncle Harold will never bring the tartar sauce Cousin Kathy out east developed a taste for. He will fling back his James Brown slick bouffant crown and howl the sound of hunting hounds choking on coal dust. Remind her she's still a West Virginia holler girl. Remind us travels ain't useful without this knowing. Thank you.
Well, all I can say is I told you so, right? I told y'all. Thank you so much, Alrenee. It's just such a pleasure to hear your work and your voice. My goodness, what a night we are having. Oh goodness. Okay. Well, moving on. Carter Taylor Seton has had 2 books published in 2020. The novel The Other Morgans through Kohler Publishing, and the memoir We Were Legends in Our Own Minds from Mountain State Press. And that was a book written with her husband about his career managing civic centers where he hosted the rock legends of the 70s and 80s. I can't wait to read this book. I haven't had an opportunity yet. She is also the author of Father's Troubles and Amano Amaz Amat, an unconventional love story. Numerous magazine articles and several essays, short stories, and the nonfiction Hippie Homesteaders. Her biography of the late Ken Hetchler, The Rebel in a Red Jeep, was released by West Virginia University Press in 2017. Her book, Me and Mary Ann, is a compilation of stories of her renegade childhood and youth. Both Hippie Homesteaders and The Rebel in the Red Jeep were nonfiction Weatherford Award finalists. Forward magazine also named her debut novel, Father's Troubles, as a book of the year. Amato Amas Amat, an unconventional love story, was designated indie approved by indiereader.com, and they named her one of 9 authors nationally who break boundaries with indie lit. She holds a Tamarack Foundation Fellowship Award for Lifetime Achievement in the Arts, and the West Virginia Library Association honored her with their Literary Merit Award. Marshall University's College of Liberal Arts honored her with an award of distinction, and she received the Governor's Award for Lifetime Achievement in the Arts in 2016. So it goes without saying that Carter is an amazing, highly accomplished woman and writer. She's deeply involved in the many poets and writers' activities in her home state of West Virginia, and she reaches out to Ohio and Kentucky as well. Needless to say, so many of us call her friend. She manages conferences, live interviews, and still manages to find time to write. It is my great honor to welcome Carter Taylor Seton to the Spoken and Heard stage. Carter.
Thank you so much, Carrie. This is a real honor for me. It's a hard act to follow, I have to say, to follow both of these wonderful, wonderful readers. I am going to read from The Other Morgans, and I want to just give a brief little kind of teaser about what this book is about. And then what I hope to do is to paint several word pictures so you will understand the contrast in the 2 lives that A.J. Porter has to choose between. It's about history, race, ancestry, love, and particularly about the meaning of home. AJ is a woman who grew up on a dirt farm in West Virginia, which she owns, and you'll find out as I read from the book, how she's surprised by a letter that changes her life entirely. And she's given 1 year to make a drastic decision in her life, whether to choose to stay in poverty or accept a pipe dream, whether to stay in West Virginia or to move to Virginia. And she's got 1 year to make this decision. At the edge of the pasture stood a young woman in jeans so tight her mother often questioned how she got them on. A single black braid split her back like an exclamation mark. In her left hand, she held an envelope from the Fayette County Sheriff's Office. Her heart sank as she stared at it. She knew what was inside, the farm's annual tax bill. Each year, she dreaded its arrival. Opening it, she realized the amount was even more than last year's. How the hell is that possible? This farm ain't worth a penny more than it was when Daddy died, and I sure shit didn't vote for no tax increase. Tears sprang, but she blinked them away. Unless her garden crop was spectacular or she was able to sell one of the cows, she knew she'd once again be pinching from her monthly mine widow's pension to accumulate enough to pay the full amount before the October deadline. Things like a new insulated coat to replace the one she'd ripped on the barn door, porch roof paint, and a new high tunnel for the garden would have to wait. The fear of losing the family farm for delinquent taxes was an albatross that had hung around her neck since her husband Jeff's death in a mining accident 4 years earlier. Since then, she'd become her own Robin Hood, robbing from one envelope of cash to fill the empty one meant for taxes. So far, she'd managed, but each year the anxiety returned with the mail. She replaced the sheriff's greeting in its envelope and put it in her back pocket. She sighed again, then opened a cream-colored envelope addressed to Mrs. Audrey Jane Porter. The envelope's paper felt rich and thick, unlike most of the mail she received. She turned it over. On the back was an embossed gold crest and a red wax seal. What the hell is that? Looks like a puddle of candle drippings. I ain't never seen such on a letter. She had to open it just to see who would send such a thing. Inside was a sheet of official-looking letterhead. At the top, a gold crest matching the one on the envelope wrinkled the stiff vellum paper. It said, "I don't know if your father or grandfather ever told you, but your grandfather, James Ramsey Morgan, had a stepbrother, Jackson Parkhurst Morgan, who lived here in Dillard County, Virginia. He would have been your great uncle. She lowered the sheet, and the horse dancing at the end of the oval riding ring caught her attention. Leaning on the fence, her elbows rested in the cradles Gunner had chewed into its top rails. Now some of those boards looked scalloped. Wondering why she did that, she stared again toward the tree-covered mountains. The work-thinned young woman often stood in that spot in the late afternoon after her chores were done. It felt like a sanctuary to her. It was her way of winding down. She picked up the letter again. On April 24th, 2016, Jack Morgan died at 94. His will left his entire estate to his stepbrother, James, your grandfather. Mr. Morgan never married and had no other siblings. Since your grandfather is also deceased, and we have recently learned that your father, Don Ray Morgan, is also deceased, you, as his only child, are the heir to your great-uncle's substantial estate, which includes a home here in Dillard County. It seemed unreal, like winning the lottery, which she played by habit with no expectation of ever winning the big jackpot. The rest told her how to contact the lawyer and Mr. Morton Mulgrew, but she couldn't focus on that right now. This needed to sink in. She'd been born and raised on her Fayette County mountain in West by God, Virginia, and in all her 33 years had never stepped foot outside the state's borders. Her family in that mountain had overshadowed her entire unremarkable life. It wasn't that she didn't love both, or for that matter, every inch of her farm in Gimlet Hollow. She did, deeply. But as she stood, letter in hand, she allowed herself to dream. It wasn't the first time she'd done that either. She'd always wanted more, although she didn't know really what more was. Once college had been her more, that is, until she'd been forced to drop out after only one semester. But now that she held the actual possibility of more in her hand, she wondered if another life were even possible. She jumped as the screen door squealed and then slapped shut. "Mama, Granny says it's supper time. We're having fried pork chops," yelled AJ's daughter, Annie. AJ folded the letter, returned it to its fancy envelope, and slid it into her jeans hip pocket along with the tax bill. Excited but wary, she knew she needed to tell her mother, but this wasn't the time. She needed to know more first. "Coming," she yelled back across the yellowing yard. So she makes the decision to go to Virginia to see what in the world this is all about. And she meets this Mr. Mulgrew. So as they drive out to the house, this is the conversation. "Here we are," Mulgrew announced as he turned toward the ornate wrought iron gate between two whitewashed brick entrance walls. Each bore a deeply carved inscription, Morgan, 1722 on one side, and Langford Hall on the other. At Mulgrew's touch on the remote clipped to his visor, the gate swung open. AJ's eyes widened as they crept up the winding gravel driveway, which was shaded by a canopy of towering magnolia trees, and she could see the sun glistening on the slate roof. The whitewash on the bricks had faded over time, giving the house the look of a late summer rose. Nevertheless, Langford Hall sat impressively surrounded by a precisely trimmed privet hedge. Enormous boxwood shaped like balls flanked each end of the shrubbery fence. "It's a daggum mansion, and it's near as big as the Greenbrier. My God, I've never seen a house this big except on HGTV. Good Lord, Mr. Mulgrew, did Jack live here all by himself? It's as big as a hotel." Mulgrew laughed and tapped on the horn. For the most part he did, but he did have some rooms cordoned off as a museum. And of course there are many guest rooms. And in the old days, servants lived on the third floor. It's storage now. "Come on, let's go. I want you to meet Mrs. Collins." The ponderous hunter green front door adorned with a pineapple-shaped door knocker opened, and a petite older woman wearing a wide-brimmed sun hat stepped onto the broad expanse of the wraparound porch. At the sight of Mulgrew and AJ, she threw her arms open wide. Mulgrew climbed the steps and moved smoothly into her embrace. "How are you, Morton? It's always good to have you visit," Miss Collins said between pats on Mulgrew's back and air kisses. "And this must be Audrey. Welcome, my dear. We are so glad you've come." Mrs. Collins stepped forward to hug AJ as well, but AJ extended her hand instead. The older woman graciously stopped in her tracks and took it. Thank you, ma'am. Nice to meet you too. This house is something else. It looks like some movie star's house. Would you like to see inside? Miss Collins said as she headed toward the door. And please, call me Isabel. And I'm AJ, not Audrey, AJ replied with a nod and a smile. As the door closed behind him, its brass door knocker sounded a solid thud. AJ flinched, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The room felt cool and vaguely damp, as if the doors and windows were never opened. To AJ, it smelled like Witcher's funeral parlor back home. Her nose wrinkled involuntarily. On the floor of the two-story entrance hall, a burgundy and green Persian rug softened their footsteps. AJ felt as if she should lower her voice to match. Directly in front of the trio, a wide serpentine staircase bordered by dark banisters wound its way to the second-floor landing. Its treads were carpeted in a complimentary burgundy runner. AJ craned her head back to see the top landing. We'll see the upstairs later, Miss Isabel said. Morton, you don't need to go with us. You know every inch of this place. Why don't you go into the library and we'll join you shortly for tea or something stronger. She chuckled. Come with me, AJ. As they walked through the rooms, each more amazing to AJ than the last, Isabel gave a running commentary on the artifacts in each room. Open floor-to-ceiling windows announced to AJ that she was in the South. She'd seen this kind of architecture, wraparound column porches, tall windows made for ventilation, and winding staircases in movies like Cat on the Hot Tin Roof or her favorite, Gone with the Wind. Isabel pointed out Dolly Madison's silk shoes on a living room side table, positioned casually as if she'd just removed them after dancing. The room looked as long as a basketball court. Ornate tapestries and oil paintings of pastoral settings covered the walls as if this were a museum. As Isabel waved toward Thomas Jefferson's fiddle atop a dining room highboy, she dramatically asked AJ to imagine him retrieving it after dinner to accompany the dancing. AJ could see it. The living room was as large as any ballroom she'd ever read about, although she'd never actually been in one. Dances she attended were strictly of the high school gymnasium or community center square dance variety. As they rounded the dining room table that could seat 18, Isabel spouted off the names of the imposing Confederate officers in the oil portraits, which she said were painted on the Civil War battlefield, but AJ didn't catch them. She was overwhelmed. By the time they reached the large paneled and book-stuffed library where Mr. Mulgrew sat on a long leather sofa, his feet propped on the low table in front of him, AJ wanted something stronger than tea. It was too much. All this could be is mine. All I got to do is tell him I want it. So she continues on the tour with AJ continues on the tour with Isabel, who just loves telling all the things about the house. Back in tour guide mode, she began pointing and talking. The earliest grave here dates back to 1740. It belonged to Langford Pierce Morgan, who built the original house here. He was a surveyor sent over by King James II, and he was given this land as payment for his work. Originally, it included about 12,000 acres, but over the years, one or another of his descendants sold parts of it. Now it's only about 4,000 acres. AJ laughed at the idea that 4,000 acres could be referred to as only. Her farm was a bit over 10, 15 if you counted the woodlands. The two continued down the rows with Isabel giving they're in the cemetery, by the way. The two continued down the rows with Isabel giving AJ a quick bio on each inhabitant of the family plot. One, Forrest Elias Morgan, Sr., she admitted had been a slaveholder. And his son, Forrest Elias, Jr., had died fighting for the South in the Civil War when he was very young. Another, Ben Hutchinson, she described as a World War II pilot who'd been captured by the Germans, suffered horribly in a prison camp, and committed suicide after he came home. His wife, Molly, who lay beside him, was actually the Morgan family member. Some had elaborate marble markers, others were granite slabs flattened into the ground as if they were slowly disappearing. One in the rear corner had no marker, only a worn wooden cross. It seemed out of place among the other stone markers. On each of these, most of the names were clear. However, a few were badly worn. Reeves, Archibald, Mariah, Mildred, names she'd never heard of on the West Virginia side. Husbands, wives, and several children rested there. Fascinated, AJ kept wondering who kept the moss from overtaking them. As they reached the recent grave of Jack Morgan, Isabel stopped. A pristine red granite tombstone marked the earth, but the grass hadn't fully grown in to cover the settling earth. "How'd you learn all this ancient stuff?" AJ asked. "Mr. Jack loved genealogy, you know. It was his hobby. I helped him record it all. Between that and the estate's business, he kept me bustling, believe me. But I enjoyed it, loved it really. Genealogy was important to him. It was his way of surrounding himself with family. Their stories were his history, and that's why he's so eager to find a member of the family to inherit Langford Hall." So she decides to go there and spend the year like she's supposed to. And that morning, as she's going back home, she's thinking about the choice she's going to have to make. The next morning, AJ downshifted into first gear as she threaded her truck up the switchbacks of the mountain below Turkey Knob. She'd lowered her window as she began the climb in order to take in the familiar smells of home. She loved the sometimes cloying fragrance of honeysuckle that covered the pasture-fenced spots, and the rich scent of the earth turned often to disrupt the weeds' attack on her crops. As she climbed, she noticed that the temperature was at least 10 degrees cooler than it had been in Hadley when she left. There she'd been uncomfortable with the smothering summer heat. At home, the air was crisper, even on hot days. She tried to find a country radio station, but gave up in frustration. Aside from hard rock or religious programming, all she could find was National Public Radio. It was just as well. She really needed the quiet drive to think. She sighed and mentally ticked off her list of concerns. She wasn't sure what her boyfriend would do. He'd softened after they talked it over again, but she didn't know if leaving for a year would be a relationship deal breaker. She hoped not. As for Alice, she didn't know yet what AJ was required to do before she could sell the estate. Truth to tell, AJ still didn't know what she'd do in the long run, but she knew this might be her only chance at something more, the chance to be her own person. On Turkey Knob, she knew everyone, and there was comfort in that. On the other hand, everyone knew her too, and her background. She always felt they saw her as the poor daughter of that drunk B-Ray, or as the sad little widow whose husband had died so tragically, leaving her to run a farm and take care of her mother and daughter. If she moved, it would be her chance to build a new life, one where people would only know her for herself and her ability to manage the large estate known as Langford Hall. She wanted that life, to at least try it. That would sound selfish to do in Alice, but she couldn't deny how she felt. Instinctively, she knew that if she wanted to accept her inheritance, she wouldn't know if she wanted to accept her inheritance unless she gave life in Hadley a try. Besides, she rationalized, the road ran both ways. She could always go home again. She couldn't explain those feelings to them in that way, of course. So the last section is after she's been there for a couple of months. She goes on Labor Day, and this is several months later. Driving back to West Virginia for the first time since Labor Day, AJ brimmed with mixed emotions. Home. She was going home. The mere word filled her with joy and exuberance. She couldn't wait to see her little farm, her family, and Gunner, even if she couldn't ride him. She'd broken her arm at the other place. Yes, she enjoyed the comfortable life Langford Hall had provided. She'd luxuriated, no longer having to do the farm chores and not having to worry about money. But at the same time, she hadn't realized how much she missed Annie, and surprisingly, the ever-sharp tongue of her mother. In Virginia, life presented different challenges, one she'd felt somewhat ill-equipped to handle. At home, the familiar problems were just that, familiar, and therefore within her ability to cope. Yet as she climbed the familiar highway, she noticed, as if they hadn't been there before, the small, dilapidated homes barely hanging onto the sides of the mountains. She began to count more than a few closed gas stations, grocery stores, bait shops. How come I never realized how poor this area is before now? Guess it was so familiar I never paid no attention to it. Maybe it's the contrast to Langford Hall and Hadley, but this is pitiful. She looked down at her outfit, tailored slacks, a ruby cable knit sweater, and the abalone necklace that had become a favorite, and realized how out of place it was going to look on Turkey Knob where she'd been raised. Maybe it's me that's changed. Geez, am I really getting above my raisin like Dew said? Hope I've got some old jeans at home. Alice won't recognize me dressed like this. As she continued driving, her thoughts, unbidden, drifted back to Virginia, however. Wonder what it's going to be like to have all those accountants milling around when I get back. She's got a whole problem down there that's a different set of problems. And so she's thinking about the guy that she's met that she's going to have to do work with. But it's a contrast between the set of problems she knows and the set of problems that she doesn't know. And how do you make a decision as to what is home?
Oh my goodness, Carter, you gave us just enough that now we have to read the book no matter what. And I did post that, but I will put that in there again real quick. And I've also got a link to Carter's website for her other titles, but the other Morgans you can get with the first link that I've posted. So I don't know if anybody had a question for one of our featured guests tonight. If you would just put that in the chat, I will be able to see it and we can have them answer. And if you don't have a question, if you might have a poem or a paragraph or two to share with us or a song, you might also put your name in the chat, and we'd love to have you read tonight if you'd care to. We can probably have 3 or 4 people read if anybody's interested. And don't be shy, because we've had a vast offering tonight. We've gone many directions for someone to share a poem with us. So I hope perhaps somebody will. But I'm not seeing any questions, and I'm not seeing any people volunteering. Come on now, I know some of you. There we go. Sean Kelbley is going to, share with us tonight. So I'm going to ask Scott to allow Sean into the webinar. And don't make me call you by your name, folks, those of you who are here. And Scott is trying to allow Sean to come in. So wait just a second. In the meantime, I am wondering if any of our panelists had a question for another panelist, if you'd like to turn on your mics, and maybe you would like to ask each other a question as well. As in Carter and El Renee and Karen, if you'd like to speak to each other, if there's anything you might like to ask each other.
I would just like to compliment both of the poets for their remarkable word pictures that they shared with us. They're absolutely beautiful.
Agreed. What a night. My goodness.
Yes, thank you all. This has been really lovely. I guess one question that I had is what your approach is to beginnings and to endings. I always end up tweaking everything, but I feel like different writers have different philosophies between those things, specifically whether an ending should be like a dismount or a quiet closing of a door, and whether beginning should have a grounding or kind of throw you in the middle. So I'm just curious.
Carter, I feel like you should take that question, because beginning and ending a novel is monumental, right?
Well, I think what happens for me is that something inspires me and nags at me until I figure out how I want to approach it. In this case, it actually is a house that was in my family for 10, it is still in our family for 10 generations. And when I first saw that house, my thinking was what stories that house could tell. So I had to figure out a way to tell some of those stories without it simply being a history, although the stories that I've used ended up being fictionalized dramatically or completely fictionalized. And then I've kept thinking about it. I had read a book that talked about the notion of home. And so it always has been I think because I lived away from here for 10 years, it's always been a question, is it where you make your roots or is it where you came from? That what is home? So I'm an outliner for the most part. So I knew from the beginning which decision she would make. But I also did not know how she would resolve that. That came to me as I was writing the book. So it's a little bit of both. It's a beginning. You don't want to tell all backstory in the beginning, so you got to weave that in. And I wanted to just start with her situation. What is going on with her? And all of a sudden she's faced with this dilemma and has 1 year in which to make the decision. And that ticking clock is also a device that, that's good to use to drive the story. So that's kind of how I did it. And I won't give away how she does make the decision.
No, you should not. I kind of have a question, and then we're going to let Sean share his poem with us. But I just wonder when all of you started writing. I know lots of people start when they're kids, other people later. I think Carter's story is an exceptional one, and I would love for her to share that, but maybe she doesn't have to be the first one to answer the question, but I'd like to know that of all of you. When did you start writing? When did you realize that you were a writer or that you were writing? Karen, you want to go first?
Oh, sure. Thank you. In my very early 40s, I went through a really difficult situation, and just coming out of that, I just began writing. Suddenly, my head was full of things to write, and I would drop groceries at the door and run to write them. So I returned to YSU to finish a degree I had started in my youth with a little handful of poems, and found and the writing people. And so that was my good luck. But later on, I heard my mom telling someone, oh, yeah, she wrote poems when she was a kid. And she was right. I just had completely forgotten. So I think I've always loved writing in one way or another.
I think you, El Renee. Yeah.
I think for me, I was always a kid that paid attention a lot to what was going on around me and listened and observed. I was raised as an only child. And my family has a lot of elders were always around me. And so to be able to sit at the adult table, as time went by, it was like a big deal that I could kind of be a little covert. So that was really, really important. I think for me, I really want to give a shout out to Columbus Public Schools. When I was growing up in the 80s and late 80s, 90s, the school that I went to had a huge literacy program. And they actually brought children's book authors into the school from the time I was in kindergarten through 5th grade. And so that, I think, really cultivated this idea that, that these people who write books, like, they actually live and breathe, like they're still here and you can meet them and talk to them, which was lovely. But I think the poeting part came for me as a school assignment, which is really, really quite funny. But my second grade teacher had this hat where there were different names of famous people on pieces of paper. And we had to pick a name out of the hat, and that would be the person that we would have to do a presentation on. And I was a very shy kid. I didn't want to be out front, so that scared the daylights out of me. And so I picked this name, and it says Langston Hughes. And I didn't know who Langston Hughes was at all. And I had my friends around me, and one of my friends, a little girl, she had Johnny Appleseed, and someone else had George Washington. And I was trying to switch with them because I didn't know who this Langston Hughes was. But I'm so grateful. And I think that is the thing. It introduced me to poetry, but it also, I could hear a writer writing in the language that I heard my family speak in. And to be seen as a little Black girl like that was so tremendous. And then when I had to read that poem, Mother to Son by Langston Hughes, my first poem I ever read, and to hear the pens drop in the classroom and everyone kind of lean forward toward me, that's when I knew that language had power and reading it had power. And even though I was so shy, I wanted to do something with that. And Thurber House in Columbus helped me cultivate how to do that as a kid, and I love them. So, yeah.
Oh, wonderful story. And like you, I love Thurber House. They do such amazing work. Yes, great story. Okay, Carter.
Well, I cannot remember a time when I didn't read. I know I didn't read, as an infant, but I feel like I did because that's always what I did. I hid under the covers and read, and I just was obsessed with reading. And so I became an English major when I finally went to college. And my dad, of course, said, you can't do anything with that. And he was probably, he was right if you were talking about practicality. But the thing that was interesting is that back then, they didn't teach writing in literature classes. It was all read the novel, read the poem, read the essay, and tell me what you think it means and what he was trying to say and all that sort of thing. And so most of my career, I was in marketing in one form or another. And what I wrote were things like press releases and maybe a magazine article here and there to explain what I was trying to do. And I got challenged by my best friend when I told her the bare bones of the story of my first novel, which is called Father's Troubles. And she said, Carter, good grief, you need to write a book. And I said, Allison, I'm sorry, I write press releases. I don't write books. And she was an artist who never met a challenge that she wouldn't undertake. And so she said, well, it's just time you started. So this was about 1997. So we're talking just barely 20 years ago. And when I wrote that book, something magical happened. And I realized that writing was something that I had loved doing. And so it was not published until 2003. So it hasn't been 20 years yet that I've been a published author. And I'm grateful for every day that I get the opportunity to write.
I love that story. And the Weatherford Award is an amazing award. To be a finalist is such an honor, and that's out of Berea College. Yeah. And it's a hard-won honor, and to have been selected 3 times as a finalist is just incredible. So congratulations. And to all 3 of you for your amazing work. It's been just an absolute joy to hear all of you tonight. Scott, also, Bonnie Proudfoot and Rosie Lane said they would also like to read tonight if you can get them in. But meanwhile, Sean's here, and I want to give Sean an opportunity to share his poem. Sean is a dear friend of mine, and I'm really proud of him for stepping up tonight and agreeing to read. So take it away, Sean.
Hi, everyone. Wow. Yeah, I only did it because you were asking, Carrie, because I was afraid no one would. But I was struck by all three readers tonight in different ways. And from Karen, the connection with ekphrastic writing, which I really love. From Renee, she said something a minute ago about saying her words and people leaning forward to hear them. And I was leaning forward here at home listening. And Carter, just your voice, just the language. I am a nouns and verbs person from southeastern Ohio, and I could relate to so much of what you said. This poem actually was an ekphrastic poem based on a photograph, and I can't remember who took it. It's called Old Masters. Icarus lies brightly shattered in the ditch. The cows low, told you so. Where in the silo, Icarus is drowned beneath a ton of unanticipated corn. He could have starred in daytime drama. He could have finished culinary arts at the Votech, but gravity's a thing. So Icarus is living with some woman in the trailer, cooking meth. Or Icarus is not allowed to sing the bass line in the choir at Methodist, and everyone insists his name is Meg. Or Icarus is hiding in the hayloft from sex traffickers and his cell phone's dead. Or Icarus is crouching in the runout shed and ice dogs have his scent. Or Icarus is in the house, first floor only now, the Mrs. Emphysema. He dribbles chicken broth into her mouth. Damn illegals. Goddamn kids who try to fly above their raising, from their bodies even. Goddamn farm, coyotes in the sheep, always a tractor breaking down, etc., etc. It's afternoon. Nothing has fixed itself. In the sky, the jet from somewhere else keeps flying somewhere else.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sean. That was wonderful. I love that poem. And tonight we have actually Steph Kendrick. She came in as Rosie Lane, and that's a whole other story, but she's with us tonight, and she's also a dear friend and a fabulous poet as well. So take it away, Stephanie. And you might tell us the connection that you felt with your piece.
I will. Carrie, thank you so much. You always do a fabulous job, but tonight the lineup, all three of you women are so inspirational, and I'm just really grateful that I got to sit in and listen today. On the topic of home, I decided to read a piece that's connected to home for me. And so often I feel like I write about home and then I can't really send it out anywhere because it's so personal. And, I don't know if I could do that to the people that I love. So I feel kind of safe here to read this piece. It's called International Call. He is careful on the phone, whispers he cannot talk about these things, politics or depression. All the while, my feet drag deep on civilian soil, firm enough to call bullshit without falling over. It has been years since I have seen him, for real, since I have seen him the way I know him, the boy he ran from. He is careful on the phone when he says the word divorce, like I can't feel his tears from here. I am not our father, he whispers. Truth would never feel profound if it were obvious. So we use silence to convince ourselves. It is here, where in the absence of his words, he is still a boy with a plastic Tonka truck, running over slugs in the gravel. I stay for a moment, and I am still a girl who never bit into a worm hiding inside fruit. Thank you, guys.
Oh, that was wonderful. Thank you, Steph. And last but not least tonight, we have our wonderful Bonnie Proudfoot to share a poem with us tonight. And Bonnie is also a novelist, so it's pretty exciting.
What an inspiring night, as everyone's been saying. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to read, but also thanks for bringing these wonderful readers to Athens Spoken and Heard. And it's overwhelming how lucky we are, I think, in our little Athens town to have such fantastic people come and read. I mean, I just feel so grateful. I was thinking about, could I read a poem? And I thought about El Renee's Mama poem, which I love, and her hairdressing poem. And so I thought I'd share a poem I recently wrote about my grandmother. And it's called Superpowers. Superpowers. If all my thoughts have been thought before, who was the one who thought them? Probably it was some stranger, but maybe not. Maybe it was someone I knew, or maybe someone I loved so hard that she is actually a part of me, like my grandmother, who came by on poker nights. Maybe I inhaled her like the smoke from the tip of her parliament, or I ate her up like a slice of her pound cake with lemon drizzle icing. And my superpowers? I used to think they were accidents or destiny, like winning the lotto, or that someone could be switched at birth, or that there could be the slightest chance that a baby, say me, could have hurtled down to Earth on a tiny cradle-shaped spaceship from a place sort of like Krypton, but maybe all my powers slipped in under my bedroom door with the smoke, the smell of gin, the pink and green neon light sifting through those slats in the Venetian blinds, my brain soft and doughy like warm, silly putty, taking in the patterns on the wall. Sometimes everything is pink, and sometimes everything tastes like lemon, and sometimes the soundtrack in my head is the overture to Guys and Dolls. And what the men in the control booths who want to learn more about brainwashing don't know is that once you hear that overture, all you can think of is how you can't wait to see Frank Sinatra make his entrance as Nathan Detroit. And of course, one day I see myself in my 60s, for crying out loud, seated at my dining room table, facing my own grown children, using some of my superpowers to count face cards and take tricks to know exactly where the line is between luck and skill. And these fingers of mine start to fuss for an invisible cigarette, though there is none in sight. And I know that the odds are good that life will betray them, that their bodies will betray them, that winning flashes off and on like a lotto sign, and that I, who at age 6 dressed up to trick or treat as a Parliament flip-top box, all white and blue and glowing, I will betray them too. I who cracked open the egg and hopped the train, and they who filled pickup trucks with sleeping bags and hit the road. But for now I am here, the dealer, my elder son on my right, thinking things like, luck be a lady, and watch the cards, thinking, shine the bat signal, spin out that web, go ahead, cut 'em.
Oh my goodness, that was just wonderful. Thank you, Bonnie and Sean and Steph. Oh my gosh, and Karen and El Renee and Carter. What an absolutely amazing evening, as I suspected it would be. And thank you. Thank you. I know this is a busy, hectic time. If there's no one else who would care to read in our audience, this is like one last chance. Then I'm going to, I'm watching the chat here and I don't see anything. So I'm going to bid everyone adieu. I hate that. I wish we could just stay and read for hours and hours. And when the times are better and we don't have to worry so much about pandemic, maybe that can happen. I have room in my home. I know many of us do, and we need to get together and actually have a big old read fest. So I know we're all looking forward to those times. But I do want to wish everyone season's greetings. I want to thank everyone who attended and those who were watching on Facebook and commenting, and just the generous support of your time is just it's just a wonderful thing, and it keeps all of us going. And I appreciate that, and I know our featured artists do as well. And I see that the chat's still going with people saying, one big thanks to Karen, El Renee, and Carter. We're so lucky to have heard you tonight. And that is so true. So I think all of us are looking forward to the new year. So let me be one of the first to wish you all a happy new year. And I hope to see everyone back on January the 21st for Allison Luderman. And I don't know if y'all are Sun Magazine fans, but Allison is quite often published there, and a very accomplished poet. So I hope to see you all then. So until then, be safe, remain vigilant, and until we meet again.
Thank you all so much.
Good night, everybody.
That's why we just came in to ask for those 2 additional permits.